Okay, so go ahead and call the meeting to order at 5 o'clock. Do we have any modifications and agendas, additions to the agenda, Kevin?
The only adjustment is that Eric Hoffman from Some Design is unable to attend tonight, but we can still discuss some next steps on that.
Okay. Next we have public comment. We appreciate public comment, and just a reminder to everyone that we will be limiting it to 5 minutes per person per subject, and we love hearing from the people, and but we are unable to interact with them during this public comment, but we will definitely take comments into consideration and follow up. So first I have Linda Maddox signed up.
So it's Linda Maddox. Yeah, 3018 Dana Lane, Hood River, Oregon. And I want to speak with you, which I've just realized I've got the wrong glasses, but that's all right. I want to speak with you about the portion on page 153 of your packet, whole section on the overview of the Marina Basin update. That's what it's called. Okay. So what I want to do, there's some mistakes in this document. I would like just to correct them quickly and sum up at the end, if that's okay. And Brian's going to speak afterwards. And so anyway, so I'm going to just go on to page 154. Is that helpful to tell you where I am?
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, it's 154 near the bottom. And you have under your strategic business plan, for the people that don't have in front of you what we have, you talk about self-sustainability in all non-bridge areas of the port is in that plan. But basically, I really truly believe that's not possible. It just isn't possible because of the kind of property it is. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to make statements about different parts of this. Does that work?
Yeah, we'll just make sure that we have the 5 minutes.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not sure. I'm going to try it. I'll talk as fast as I can. Okay. I don't want to keep you too long. Okay. I totally agree with on page 155 with the developed lower handle mill sites for boat, RV, and trailer storage. I think that's a good idea. You talk about reducing operational costs on the paid parking program. And I could see that wasn't bringing in as much money as it could. And I definitely think you need to check other parking plans for that. And then also, one thing I've noticed that you've been doing is every time you have a job that needs to be done, you hire somebody like the gal that's helping with communications for 50 grand. And she's got, I think, a 5-year contract, which is really a lot. I mean, that's a lot of years if it doesn't work out. And I think that you are probably overpaying on some of those. But I appreciate your trying to reduce that. Yes, I can. On page 156, and Kevin, this is for you because you probably came up with it. At the bottom of the page, toll subsidy for marina buildings. Is that a mistake? It shouldn't be 127, but 252. But somehow your total for all of them at 710 is correct. Okay, but this number should not be 127. It should be 252. Do you see where that is? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just an arithmetic a mistake. The total is correct. Okay. I studied this afternoon. I'm like, buzzing through this thing. I feel like I've got something out of whack here, but that's all right. I see, I wonder to a certain extent where that exclusion area is on page 157 that you're talking about. Is that 6F property? Is that where the bridge is actually going to go, near where the bridge is coming in? There's an exclusion area that allows, this is in sort of in the middle of the paragraph on the bottom, that allows commercial development within the 6F property. And maybe you guys can't interpret that for me right now. It's okay. It's about it. I just wondered on the map where it would be.
That might be some information that staff can get back to you.
Okay, well, they
We're
can't.
going through that.
Yeah, we're gonna be going through it later.
Okay, that's great. And then on the next page, 158, I have sort of got some language that might solve a problem in the top paragraph. You've got undeveloped property. I mean, it says undeveloped properties must be used for public recreational uses, but you're trying to put into that sentence, or do need to try to put into that sentence, the placement of the new bridge. So I've got some language. I thought, well, you could just say undeveloped properties must be used for public recreational uses with the exception of the placement of the new bridge. Okay. So, yeah, okay. I was brilliant once, or, twice. That's about it.
So
Okay.
Linda, I don't mean to cut you off because I do think that a lot of the things that you're saying are valuable, but it has been 5 minutes. And so would it be maybe more helpful if, since you do have some detailed questions,
I don't really have detail, but
or detailed information to go ahead and, okay.
Okay, I'm on the last page. On the last page is 159. The Marina Green and the Harborside Trail are protected by federal grant restrictions. That's great. The most important thing that I saw in all of this is the financial aspect, the problem with that. And so I really believe the port needs to increase their portion of the local taxes. I don't know what that process is, but in my tax bill, I paid $5.13 last year. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And so anyway, I think that's.
Thank you.
Thank you, Christine, for bearing with me. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much, Linda. Okay, next we have Brian Robb. Brian, did you have additional things besides the?
No,
can include
I'm
this
actually
email
gonna
in there.
read what I wrote.
Perfect, thank you.
This is more polished.
Yeah, pardon me for reading what I wrote, but I like to keep that way. My name is Brian Robb. I live at 922 Union Street in Hood River and been here since 1987. Good evening, Port Hood River Commission. I'm speaking tonight about the port's discussion of adding commercial development in Port Marina Park. I did mention this to Kevin earlier that the dates on this is incorrect. The initiative was done in November of 1995, not 1994. The public uproar over additional commercial development at Port Marina Park began in 1994 when a hotel alongside the marina was proposed by the DM Stevenson Ranch. This project was soon shelved, but the public realized that unless all of Port Marina Park was completely protected and not solely the Marina Green, future similar proposals would be inevitable. To this end, an initiative was placed on the ballot and passed by the Port Hood River electors on November 7th, 1995, that prohibited additional commercial development throughout Port Marina Park. I note with a bit of irony that the first option listed on page 159 of your packet is to amend the ordinance created by the vote of the port electors to, quote, clarify development restrictions. Upon reading the ballot measure, it is perfectly clear what the intent of the ordinance is, and it does not need to be clarified. Clarification is nothing more than an attempt to completely void the spirit and intent of the ordinance without specifically saying so. If clarification means to determine what exactly can be done with the two existing buildings being discussed, Section 4 of the ordinance is clear. Section 4 states that the buildings may be maintained and renovated. To say that these buildings can be torn down and a boutique hotel put in their place is simply ludicrous and goes against the intent of the ordinance. The people knew what they were voting for, and they have said no additional commercial development should be allowed at Port Marina Park, period. In closing, the port has said many times in the past that all port properties should pay for themselves. This argument is fatally flawed. Parks almost never pay for themselves. Were this the case, most parks should cease to exist. Parks benefit the community as a whole, adding to quality of life, and make the community a desirable place to visit, live, work, and play in. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Is there any other public comment that missed sign up? Not, then we will go on to, I'm sorry. To consent agenda. Any questions about consent? Not, can I get a motion?
Move that we approve the consent agenda as written. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Chair, aye. Okay, informational reports. Commissioners, do you have any questions about the monthly financial report, full disclosure report, or waterfront report? Okay. Commissioner Fox?
First off, I want to compliment the county. It's taken us 4 years to get to these reports. It's finally there. And I would like to take a few minutes and go through a couple of the reports and see if you all agree what it's telling me and it's telling you. Because if you take this at face value, we've got some challenges facing us in the last 5-6 months of the year. That we could blow the budget, we could come underneath the budget, but we're not going to hit on the budget. So there's some actions that I think need to talk about. But if you look at, I'm going to, first off, you go to 101, it's a nice summary going all the way across. And a couple of things that comes to play there, and we knew this at budget time, is that we were planning on spending $3.5 million more this year than we really had revenue for the particular year, because we're drawing down on our reserves. We knew that. Where we are 7 months in, we've drawn down a little more than half of that. We're at about $1.5 million, almost 1.6. And I take a look at the next page, which is a good breakdown within by department, the general fund by department. A couple of things to note there. Industrial properties. We've got a planned capital outlay for industrial properties of 1.8 million. We're only 5% burned through so far, so we've got a long ways to go. At commercial buildings, we got 530. We haven't spent anything on capital improvements. Airport, we're into it a bit, but we still got a long ways to go. We haven't spent anything at Marina, waterfront recreation, and we spent a little bit on parking. So one of the things that it shows me is we're 7 months into the program. We're not really spending money on capital improvements that we thought we were. So do we really, in fact, have a plan together that's going to have us spend this money and get the projects done by the end of the year? What's cool about this report, if you go to the next page, it starts to break that down. You start to look at the Big 7, Lot 1, Hayward Building, and so on. Some observations that I see here. where are those areas where the revenue is less than the plan? In other words, if the revenue is for the whole year, you should be at about 58% spent if it was pretty well linear. So in the case of Big Seven, we're way under on our revenue, which, and I'm sure there's a good reason that I think our vacancy rate is below where we thought we were going to be. Okay. Same thing, the Hayward building, we're at about 57%. That looks pretty good. 51% on Jensen, so it's a little under. If you go over to the Wasco building, we're only at 7%. So the question would be, what's going on there?
And if you want me to answer right now, that one also is extremely low. That one was fully occupied on June 30th. And then there was a single tenant in that building and they moved out on July 1st. And so we've been working to get it occupied, but it is not occupied fully at this point.
So if we did a forecast today,
Mhm.
you would probably not forecast that you're gonna hit 289.
We will not hit 289 in that.
So unless you really, and I don't mean this is not a criticism, this is construction or constructive discussion. So if our costs go up and our revenue is down, it's just gonna cause us to go more negative.
Yes.
So in that particular case, when I look down below in expenses, internal services is 85% spent, which to me means your 91,000 that we assumed that we were gonna budget for.
And so here's what happens though, when a building is not occupied, then we are spending additional revenue, additional time getting that building ready to be, and especially since it was rented to a single tenant in the past, it needs, walls put in and much done to it to get it ready.
Totally understand, get it,
Uh-huh.
the picture is telling us that.
Uh-huh.
I think for us to take the next step and managerial control, something like once every 6 months, we ought to do a quick forecast.
Mhm.
And you have your budget, you have your actual, okay, what's your anticipated forecast? So you can see all the pluses and the minuses. Where do you think you're going to be at the end of the year? But this is showing just that. Capital outlay at 0 right now, 7 months in.
Mhm.
Lot 1 is $1.1 million available. Hayward is 20,000, Jensen 200,000, Timber 10,000, Wasco 15,000, Lower Panel Mills 500,000. So I come back to the same question: do we really have a plan to do these capital improvements in the next 5 months?
And so some of these are placeholders. For example, when you're looking at ones like Halyard and even Big Seven and some of those are what we call placeholders, because we know that things are going to happen. HVACs are going to suddenly expire and have to be replaced. Things like that are going to happen. So some of them are placeholders. The other ones, the larger ones, are indeed projects that a year ago, when we were doing our budget, we did anticipate that we were going to get more done than what we are getting done. And so that's one of the challenges with Oregon budget law, is that we have to budget it. And if we don't spend it, Oregon's happy. If we do spend it, or if we go over, then they're not happy, and we have audit findings at that point. So you will tend to see, and you'll tend to see this in all local governments in Oregon, that some of these things are budgeted fairly high. So the budget that we do, that we have to legally comply with, is not always a good management tool.
And I get that. But I think everybody outside of accounting,
Mhm.
which is the rest of the organization, who is supposed to own this stuff,
Mhm.
they have to have plans to move things around to make things happen.
Mhm.
The challenge that we see here is if we budget money and we fairly quickly see we're not going to use it, then it's a waste having it sit there and not put it into play someplace else.
Can I add something?
Sure.
I'm synthesizing all this stuff and it's a great conversation. I understand the value from a state auditing perspective and everything, that we create a budget every year and that's our budget for the year.
Mhm.
Would it, how much work would it require? How difficult would it be for your department at that 6 month point to create the kind of progress report that Commissioner Fox is nudging towards? Because I agree, if we had something internal, it's not a budget, not changing the budget, we're not amending the budget, we still have our budget. It's a forecast that says, hey, boy, because of these factors, this is the more accurate financial picture. Because then when we make strategic decisions about where to allocate resources, we have that information, which is far more useful. How much workload would that create for the staff?
We actually do that. Unfortunately, it's the timing of it, because we do that in order to know, so what we have to do, like right now, I'm a little bit behind on this. What we have to do is know or to expect where we're going to be on June 30th in order to plan for next year's budget. So we do take roughly that 50% mark, and we do and basically annualize that. What's left to be spent? Some stuff gets spent very linear, very much on a line item. And so we can take something on December 31st to multiply it by 2, and we're going to be pretty close to where we're going to end the year. Other things are very cyclical, or you have to go through and analyze them. And we do that, but again, and you'll see that when we do spring planning in April, you'll see that then. We don't have the capacity at this time to get that out sooner. It's just.
Is that because you and your accounting department is doing it? And the accounting department doesn't have time to do it?
Yes,
Okay.
it would be
There's my
that.
problem. And again, this is not meant to be a criticism, it's meant to help. You guys have done an excellent job on this. The next step is who should be accountable for, question, for, I'm gonna pick the Marina Mortgage.
Mhm.
Are you accountable for the cost of the Marina Mortgage?
No, Daryl is,
Thank you.
but I'm not giving her, it's because these reports are so new. I literally got these reports done last week.
Okay.
Like,
Okay.
I was actually late. So thank you, Patty, for letting me be late. And the next step is indeed to get these to the managers so that Ryan has the ones that he needs and Daryl has the ones that she needs. Right now, they don't have that information. And I didn't have that information last Monday even.
Okay, so this is, we can wipe the ink off of it because it's not right.
Exactly.
And I get it, but for us to take the next step of evolution, we have to push the ownership of this
Right.
to the respective managers.
Yes.
And they have to own it. They're accountable for it. They're using you as a tool to assimilate it.
Right.
But once you get there, then this whole operation takes another step up.
Yes. And that is our goal.
Okay, good.
Yes.
So I got some other questions, but I really encourage you guys to take a look at it, because when you look at the values by each individual component, we got a ways to go yet.
Mhm. Yes, we do. And that's why I wanted to get to
We're
this
negative
point.
in a lot of areas. Somebody mentioned that the green space will never make money.
Correct.
We expect that.
Right. Yes.
We got to make sure the rest of it is making sufficient money to pay for the stuff that's not making money. And without these kinds of reports and people really looking at them, we don't have a chance of making that happen. It's going to be luck and momentum versus working the plan and getting it there. So again, I applaud you greatly.
We will get there.
I'm a big supporter of yours.
We will
And
get there.
let's go faster.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
I would just like to add one thing on informational reports. I thought the waterfront report was incredibly thorough and well written, and I really enjoyed reading that. It was very informative and helpful for me. So, thanks.
I'll second that. I thought you did a really nice job on it.
That's great.
And one I would also like to mention, when you go back to the consent agenda, the safety program, your safety manual is very.
Oh, you beat me to it. I was gonna do that.
Okay. That's very good.
And the safety committee.
Yeah,
Yes.
I even texted Kevin, so don't let me forget to thank Patty for all of the hard work she did on that. Okay, any other questions on informational reports, or is everyone feeling good? And I agree, 4 years, good job. This is what we've been moving forward on as a port for transparency, and I like to be able to check off the box that we're doing what we said we wanted to move towards, so.
And I would also like to mention that, both of your predecessors couldn't do this. And it was desperately needed for the port, and you guys pulled it off, so. To both you and Kevin, well done.
Okay, so next we have our presentation and discussion items. I know that we do not have Eric Hoffman here, so I think for this discussion item, the main thing that we're looking for is to give kind of a thumbs up that that Kevin and team are going in the right direction and to keep moving along. Is that,
Right.
and is there any specific requests or questions about the scoring criteria or anything else that is in this packet? Or did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Just that, we're currently under contract to get this thing finished up. We know that there's been some delays potentially with the bridge replacement effort. This effort's not going to be lost. We can keep it until we know for sure. But I think that this work is still very, very good. So I did receive comments from Commissioners Beaker and Fox. Those have been incorporated. So unless there's any, significant changes or comments on the criteria and the scoring, I'd be interested just kind of, hearing some areas that you'd like us to kind of take a look at. We don't need to spend more than a couple of minutes, but I know airport is one area that we've looked at, and
Yeah, North Ramp and South Ramp. Just to be curious, like, how would that turn out? Is it feasible at all? Is it ridiculous and not possible? Yeah, I mean, I'm very curious to see how these criteria applied to those
Yeah.
locations.
Yeah, I think I'm just mostly curious about what our real estate agent has to say and what Jeff has to say, and about available lands and.
I would also say one site that should be is this marina building right out here, which was discussed as a potential. Remember?
Oh, the Marina East building,
Yeah.
the chamber building.
Yeah, run it on that, see what comes out. And I feel like at least one test run should be on new construction.
Yeah, as we've talked, Kevin, the decision matrix works, especially for the categories above the line. When you're mixing lease versus purchase, you gotta be careful with this thing. So you can't just blindly take the number and say, this is the one. You gotta evaluate it deeper than that for that. But when you're looking at the rest of it, this will work just fine.
Great. So I've got some good ideas there. I'll work with Tom and with Jeff, and probably bring some of the samples to spring planning just to show you to see how we applied the criteria to the sites and see where it goes. The project, the whole report, and I know that the original square footage, we need to take another look to make sure that the toll takers weren't included in that original square footage. But the idea is to have this report done in May.
Perfect. Okay, perfect. Next we've got the Marina Upland discussion.
All right, I guess I'll get up to the podium and do a presentation. Patty, if you want to tee up the PowerPoint. You have that laser. Oh, look at this. It's right here. Okay, let's see here. I can figure out how to use it.
Just hold on.
There we go. Okay, great. All right, great. So my name is Kevin Greenwood. I'm the executive director here at the Port of Hood River. Last month, the commission talked a little bit about development options at Marina Green. And we learned a lot last month, especially about the 1995 citizens initiative. But there were also a lot of other elements that came out of that discussion that this presentation tonight will attempt to clarify. Next slide. So, so just to run through what we're going to touch very quickly on is the purpose for even considering this in the first place, our strategic business plan, commission goals, projects that are being considered overall, show a map of the Marina Basin because there's a lot of definitions and different terms for the areas that we're talking about. Touch on the toll subsidy for port operations, and then some of the other restrictions such as city zoning, federal grant restrictions, the 94, 95 ordinance, that I'll summarize and get into next steps. Next slide. So the purpose of this is to just basically acknowledge the fact that the Marina West East buildings have been losing money for years based upon the cost of the aging buildings and the inadequate rents at the site. The Marina Park area, as with most parks, has been acknowledged this evening, cost money to maintain and operate. Parks are typically a government service paid with taxes. The port having a low tax rate, less than $100,000 for the entire year, on an $8 million operating budget is very low. And so we've used bridge tolls to manage, to offset those costs to the parks. The commission has asked staff to look at port assets and to determine how to decrease expenses and increase revenue from all port departments. And so the focus of this presentation is really the Marina Basin and the commercial buildings that are located in the general fund. Next slide. So the strategic business plan. So all Oregon ports are required to produce a strategic business plan at least once every 10 years. The port does it about every 5. And so the current plan that we're referring to is from 2021 through 2026. So next year's commission will need to take another look at this plan. The port's current strategic business plan adopted in 2021 after COVID focuses on 3 main points. One is the support for the bridge replacement effort, looking at self-sustainability in all non-bridge areas of the port, and also an aspirational statement to strike to provide higher levels of service in the future. And just on this, we meet twice a year, spring planning and fall planning, to review those goals and make sure that we're pointed in the right direction. Next slide, please. So the port conducted fall planning in November of last year. There were 3 goals out of that session that kind of apply to this Marina Basin discussion. And one is to pursue those projects that generate positive net income, pursue projects that decrease operational costs, and then prepare for bridge replacement. And we'll get to why that's important here. Next slide. So some of the projects that have been considered over the last couple of years since I've been executive director is looking at the Marina East-West sites, look at development at the Lower Handle Mill, reduce operational costs on the existing bridge with the electronic tolling conversion, developing new parking lots on the waterfront, looking at new leases on top of the buildings for cell towers or cell structures. There's the foundation's looking at the license plate program. We're looking to reduce operational costs on the paid parking program. And we've not filled 2 management personnel positions. We also considered an RV park at the Lower Handle Mill, which didn't really pencil out. And we also looked at some other things like beach usage fees. Next slide, please. So just to get some definitions here out of what this presentation is referring to, because I don't pretend to know what the historic names of these structures are, but for the sake of this discussion, the port office building, the Marina West, which is right here. That's the DMV building. And Marina East is the old chamber building. Those are generally our only commercial buildings that the port owns. All of the other ones are considered industrial buildings. So those 3 yellow buildings are our entire inventory of the commercial buildings department. So the other key pieces is this Marina Green, which is the yard. We also have Marina Park, which I consider this area. I think the whole thing is probably considered a park. And when you come into this area, the kiosk there says Marina Park. And then we've got the jetty that has the ship docks. And then we have a seasonal dock on the south side and the Marina Moorage. So
Kevin,
yes.
You've recognized now that the jetty and the ship dock is owned by the port.
Yes, yes, they are. So I hope I got close on the historic names of those areas. Next slide. So I just want to touch on the toll subsidy, and some don't necessarily like that phraseology of toll subsidized activities. But I think it does kind of simplify what the port is up against. The port has used tolls for funding economic development projects since the bridge was purchased in 1949. In April of 23, as part of the negotiations with the state of Washington for funding of the replacement of the Hood River Bridge, the Port Commission adopted resolution number 2223-13. And that policy, which is still in place, reads that as the official policy of the port, that the port is to accomplish the goal of operating all non-bridge related activities without toll revenue no later than June 30 of 2026. And so that's a driving document for port staff as we help the commission facilitate its goals. In addition, as has been mentioned here today, the port created new funds. Debbie created our new fund structure so that we are now separately tracking bridge activities separate from those non-bridge activities. And so it's much easier to see where the subsidy is occurring in those non-bridge activities. So this chart, and correct that is an error, that 127, it should be 252 minus 252. I did some quick math over there just to make sure the rest of my numbers were good. So that was a typo. But the point of this is to show the marina buildings, which are those three commercial buildings, are running at a deficit. The Marina Basin, which is the moorage and all the parks, is running at a deficit. Waterfront Rec, which includes the balance of the port's recreational properties all the way out to the hook, are running at a deficit. And as an example, the paid parking program that the commission implemented about 2 years ago is actually helping this. And that's the point that Commissioner Fox was making earlier. These are not, the parks are not going to generate revenue, but we need to find other alternatives to make up that difference so that we can provide that good level of service. So as noted earlier, it's projects like the paid parking that staff and the commission are working on to try to keep these parks at a level of operation that we all desire. Next slide. So I'm going to switch a little bit on the various restrictions on this part of the port. And so the first one I want to touch base on is the city zoning. I don't expect you to read that because it's so tiny. And so I'm just going to summarize very quickly. The city zoning is really the underlying guidance as far as what can happen on this property. Half of Marina Green, i.e. the grassy area, and all of the eastern side of the Marina Basin is zoned commercial 2. So uses in commercial 2 zone include retail, office, hospitality, and residential in certain circumstances. There's no minimum lot size. There's no lot line setbacks. The maximum building height in that zone is 45 feet, fairly tall. Parking is 1 space per employee, and then customer parking varies depending on what the use is, and I didn't want to list all of that. Clearly, there's going to be needs for traffic impact studies and additional development studies that will be time-consuming and expensive. The other item in here, the 25 to 50,000 square foot footprint limitations. And interestingly, there's no riparian setback. So if you recall where we're putting in the Portway parking lot, there's a 75-foot setback from the Columbia River. that is exempt, that's not included at this location. Next slide. All right, so then I wanted to just point out this land and water conservation fund limitations, and this actually predates the 95 initiative. This goes back to the early 1970s. And this is something that I stumbled upon through my work on the bridge replacement effort. And so, in summary, in the early 1970s, the port received about $300,000 in federal land and water conservation funds. And that was used to pay for boat ramp, the docks, and to bring utilities to the marina. And so this map, I'll try this one more time here. This map right here shows this exclusion area. And so it is entirely to the east of the marina green grass area. But that map, that boundary, that exclusion area was negotiated by the project, HNTB, the National Park Service, and OPRD. Everything else in this boundary is restricted to recreational use. So the only kind of development that could be there would be like picnic tables, maybe a gazebo, only things that really are a benefit to recreation, except for that exclusion area. And I think what's really important here is that the new bridge would come right through this corner of the 6F boundary. And so and Commissioner Fox, I'm sure could speak more to this, but one of the NEPA related items is for the bridge or for the project to find property to mitigate that take when the landing takes place. And that's entirely separate from the 2015 initiative. So the federal grant restriction has significant mitigation requirements to develop outside of that yellow exclusion zone. And that includes finding non-recreational land that can be converted to recreational land. And I think we all know that's going to be very difficult to do. And it needs to be like dollar value for like dollar value, not for acreage. And so there's limited qualifying sites in the Mid-Columbia for this, but I think this is an important set of restrictions based upon those 1970 grants. Next slide. All right, 1995 Port Ordinance. So that was passed in November of 95 and currently is in effect. It restricts commercial development on properties within the Port Marina Park, and that's the property located east of the Hood River, north of Interstate 84, and west of Button Bridge Road. That were zoned commercial on the City of Hood River's 92 zoning map. Undeveloped properties must be used for public recreational uses only. Existing structures and infrastructures on developed properties may be maintained and renovated. So although the ordinance already permits existing structures within the Marina Basin to be renovated, staff recommends that at some point, this ordinance will need to be amended to clarify the intent of those recreational uses, but more importantly, to ensure that the bridge replacement efforts can continue at that identified location.
That is super important to the new bridge, that not many people knew of this ordinance as the bridge got cited. And right now, if the public says, no, we're not going to allow you to modify this ordinance, we can shut the bridge down. There's no other place for that bridge to go. It's got to go right in there. So we got to have a sliver of land there to allow that bridge to land there. And I don't think the ordinance ever thought there would be a replacement bridge for that way, I would think.
Well, yeah, and we do have Ashley Dougal, the Port's general counsel, who helped with this graphic and the analysis of the 95 ordinance. Ashley, do you have something to add?
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Kevin. I appreciate it. I just wanted to add a really brief note about the date. So this ordinance was initially adopted as via petition in November 1994. Then there was a lawsuit in spring of 1995 to amend the language, which resulted in some amendments and the ballot coming back as another initiative in the November of 1995. And then finally it was fully adopted in 96. So whether you want to call it 94, 95, or 96 ordinance, it's all the same with the minor revisions from the result of that lawsuit.
Thank you, Ashley. Next slide. So we're getting near the end here. Summary of the purpose of bridge tolls cease being used for general fund operations in 2026. Port operations need to be self-sufficient without reliance on tolls. The DMV and old chamber buildings lose money annually. Commission is considering a wide range of revenue generating and expense reduction initiatives. Marina Green, the Harborside Trail, and most of the Marina Basin are protected by federal grant restrictions. The ordinance will need to be amended to at least accommodate the bridge replacement project. And if there were to be some type of a land lease in this area, 100% of it could be used to offset park expenses in that same location. And so next slide, please. So I'll just basically conclude, and this is really a discussion item for the Port Commission at this point, but really some of the options are to amend the ordinance to include some of the things that have been discussed tonight. One thing that I talked to Commissioner Chapman about is really undertaking a planning effort that codifies some of these elements that are new to some of us. And then, or continuing moving forward with the process for the redevelopment of the DMV and old chamber building. But, you know, that's just kind of open to you for a discussion, and staff can listen and take notes.
Could you go back to, I think it's 2 slides to the map. So something to consider, you know, as we're talking here, you know, right now, the new bridge is going into the water October of 27. We've had 2-year delay. When we go in the water in 27, if you can I borrow your little
Yeah.
right where the port building is, going out. You activate it.
There's a little red triangle, little button.
Oh, got it. Yeah. Okay, so
I think you might push it. It might be a button that you just push and then let go and it's on. I should have practiced with it beforehand. Yeah, it kind of went up.
okay, do you see where the port? There it is. See where the port is.
You gotta hold it.
You have to hold it.
You have to be me.
Let's see, yeah. So right, don't go around circle, you'll make me sick. But right there where the port is, we're actually gonna build a trestle out into the water. And all of the concrete trucks, all the equipment are gonna come along that area into the port, turn left and then a hard right. And it's going out on that trestle and it's gonna get loaded on a barge. And it's gonna be taken out to build each of the piers and the foundations and the superstructure and stuff. All material, if it's not coming in by barge, has to come in on this side. We don't have access on the Washington side. So what that means is you're gonna have quite a bit of traffic coming through there during construction. And I don't think you want to have a hotel right next to it while construction is going on. In my mind, that discussion about should we put a hotel there or not needs to be put on hold for probably 5 years. Then take another look at it. We got lots of other land to go develop between now and then. If for no other reason, I think it's a safety issue. You're going to have a lot of heavy equipment going through there.
So I don't want to get totally into the weeds about what could happen where. I think this is more of, it sounds like there's some ordinance language cleanup that definitely needs to happen with to allow for the bridge efforts to continue. So we really need to just look at how do we clean up the language to benefit that, to protect the public open spaces of what the people want. And then also to be able to maximize the port's ability to help fund some of their parks and recreation. So in my opinion, So that we don't, we could deliberate this all night long. In my opinion, I feel like we just need to decide if we want to move forward in restructuring the language of the existing ordinance and amend it. Or do we want to scrap it and, revoke it, I guess would be, but we can't,
That's where Ashley.
yeah, I mean,
To me, you either amend it for the bridge. You could amend it for everything if you wanted, that's option two. Or you could scrap it.
well, I feel like, and commissioners, you can direct staff on this. I feel like regardless, it would be good to clean up the language. Cause then it's very transparent. The expectations are set for what's gonna happen with the public. And I do think that instead of possibly mapping out, this is gonna happen here, this is gonna happen here, if we look at this as an overall, this is our usable lands. We wanna commit a certain percentage, like if we look at right now, if 50% is open space. We wanna say the port's commitment is 50% or more open space and make sure that the public is aware of, we wanna protect these public spaces. And how do we do that? So Tor, do you have any comments on what you think would be a good way to move forward?
I'd like actually for Kevin to add one thing to the sort of the public record of his presentation. And that is, can you explain, because I think it's beneficial background knowledge for people, how I think it was in the 70s, maybe you know exactly when, I don't know, it's a little trivia. When the state froze the tax rate for port districts and how that's impacted port districts all around the state.
That would have been the early 90s.
Early 90s.
1995.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Debbie could probably speak.
Interesting.
Not because that she's, any older than I am, but.
No.
Just burn yourself. Okay, so if he's delegating.
Yeah, the details of that. So I think that's
Yeah,
really
so-
important.
So, well, and to back up just a little bit really quickly, I'm probably gonna get the year wrong on that one, 1992, I believe. They froze rates basically at that point. But at that time, the value of property was going up astronomically. And so people didn't really see a decrease in their taxes. Their taxes continued to grow astronomically. So in 1997, we actually passed a Measure 48, which then got amended slightly with Measure 50 in early 1998. I believe in May of 1998, we passed it. And basically what that did was it rolled all of the assessed value. Up to that time, everybody was taxed on real market value. At that time, it froze the assessed values as of 1995. So that became your base. And so that all passed and got the blessing, everything. It froze values at 1995 and said they can only grow 3% per year and they can never exceed real market value, which came into play in, I believe, around 2008, 2009, when we had the housing recession. We actually did see some areas where assessed value did end up higher than real market value for a really short amount of time, and then it recovered. But that was basically the timeline of that. Was there more that you want? You look like you're expecting more.
More about the
Just that it's
impact of
frozen.
how,
Right.
Linda pointed out that she looked at her property tax paid last year like $5 to the port.
Yes.
I looked at mine, it was in the same neighborhood, right?
Yes.
It's a very
Yes.
tiny, and we can't.
We can't increase it. So
Can't move it.
at that same time, it did freeze rates. And so everybody got what was called a permanent value. Prior to that, there were all kinds, and prior to that, we did spend a lot of time in elections trying to get tax bases and or tax levies passed to keep government operations going, which there's there's like an 8-hour class on that, but which I know you're not interested in. But so basically, as of today, we have a tax rate that is incredibly low, and I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it's like 20 cents per thousand or whatever it is.
3 cents.
Or 3 cents per thousand. Yes, it's incredibly low.
I'll take 20.
And and the only way that we can increase it really is you can do up to a 5-year operating levy, which we could go out theoretically. Very frequently people pick, or governments pick, a department or something that's going to be funded. So for the port, it would make sense to say we were going to go out for an operating levy for parks. Cities very often do it for police or fire. Libraries very commonly have an operating levy to fund them. But that's really the only way to get more money than what is in our permanent rate is to go out for a levy, which would need to be renewed every 5 years.
You know,
Thank you.
thinking about this, we do it a little different than a lot of places. We don't have a big tax levy. We've
we don't.
invested in property and we're getting returns on that property and personally, I'm not ready to give up that we can't generate the revenue that could be used to pay for, you know, Marina Green and non-income producing property that we have. I think the portfolio is actually pretty healthy. We need to give it a little bit more time. We've got the reports now that we can see what's going on. I'm pretty optimistic. I think we're gonna get there.
So to bring it back
To this presentation.
to this
you would ask
presentation,
For my thoughts, and my thoughts are that I would recommend to staff that we do amend the ordinance to clarify it. I don't think we should repeal it. There's an intent with the ordinance, that, we want to respect, so I don't think repealing is the right thing. I think we should clarify it though, so that's.
I have a couple things. I understand the ordinance, I understand 6F very, very clearly. What I don't see is a definition of recreation. So, and everyone's gonna have a different one. I don't see anything very clear. We can get to that later, but does that mean? We can get to it later. That's just aside. Is there a clear, Ashley?
For 6F, yes. Yep, it's actually, if you, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead, Kevin, please.
I was just gonna say on the 6F, like when we apply for a Oregon Public Parks and Rec District funding, they include all the 6F uses, and that's things like barbecues, picnic tables are allowed, like gazebos,
Specific. Okay.
things that are very specific for recreation. That's the 6F limitations.
Was there any language to that in the ordinance or is outside?
Yes. Yeah, so thank you and thanks, Kevin. Yeah, so the definitions are similar but different, and their impacts are also similar but different, right? So within the federally impacted area, you can still develop. You just have to have a commensurate production of land, right? To Kevin's point, you have to find another location where you can basically achieve a no net loss. If development is going to happen within that area, then offsite in another place, you need to produce a similarly valued piece of land that can act as an open space. That's what the
Those-
federal law.
And those don't
Yeah.
exist in the exclusion zone?
The exclusion zone back
I'm
on,
speaking to 6F now, only 6F.
yeah, so
Yeah, that was 6F. That was the federal requirements. But in contrast, in the ordinance, which again is a local requirement, that's something that you all decided to regulate your property with. That simply says no development, period, right? It's only allowed for public recreational uses in areas that are currently undeveloped. And the public recreational use currently in your existing 94, 95, 96 ordinance is very vague. It is simply a list of various uses that are qualify as public recreational use, but no actual overarching definition.
I'm gonna agree that the ordinance is gonna need to get amended. I do not think I would be in favor of rescinding it because there's an intent there that I happen to agree with, so. As far as maintaining green space, maintaining access, I don't think any of us would ever develop anything without either maintaining or increasing it, but that's irrelevant tonight. I don't think rescinding it would be the right thing to do.
so what kind of direction does staff need in order to begin that
I think that's
process?
good. There's a head nod to, in fact, I think Ashley's already working on a draft, and so we'll focus on that and bring it to spring planning with, and if it looks good, we can start that process. Like the bylaws, it's about a 2-month process, but we can get it started in April.
Okay,
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you, Adam. We appreciate all the information and research. Okay, and then that segues into the next one of the draft review commission bylaws. I don't think that the commission has done a very good job of reading all of the hard work, amazing work that everyone has put in. So I guess if we want to discuss about specific
Yeah, why don't we just start with the first one, the first,
or if we just give what we're on the right track, keep moving forward, or
well, there are some decision points.
yes.
So the first one is the commissioner compensation. So what do you, yes,
I would be more than happy to make a motion to eliminate commissioner compensation.
second,
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
okay, that settles that. The next item is the election of officers. Oh, go ahead.
Can I ask a clarification? What's the effective date of that? When do you want that to take
As soon as
effect?
possible.
When does it make it convenient for
Yeah.
your budgetary and
Yeah.
calendar? Would it make sense to do it at a calendar break?
Well, your next paycheck would be for April. So if you say it's immediate, we can just not process
Immediate.
April. Okay.
Doesn't make it harder.
No,
Go for it.
any date is fine with us. I just wanted a clarification on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. So then item number 2 on the election of officers, there was some discussion about whether to keep the 1-year term or to codify 2-year terms. I'm looking back in the old minutes. They
Mhm.
used to be 2-year terms, and so that's worth a discussion, whether to
Several years.
It's been an option for, starting with the president, it's been an option for the second year. Every president's taken that option, but it's an option.
Really?
It's kind of how we've done it. You know?
Really?
Here's a question, does that have to be codified in bylaws at all?
No,
I say the leaner the bylaws are, the prettier I think that
so
they
just
look.
keep it the 1 year.
Just keep it out of the bylaws.
Yeah,
Is that possible?
well, I think you should have at least the 1 year so you know if you're the president what your term is. and
Okay,
such.
so have bylaws say at least 1 year. I thought I saw a hand on the screen.
Maybe Ashley has.
No. Okay.
Whatever your preference.
Okay, yeah, okay, fine.
1 year.
Sure.
Okay, got it. Please note the written notes. This is kind of a staff clarification with not only, and this is with Ashley's help, so we're recommending the change there in 3. Commissioner Beaker provided some comments on item 4, and our insurer and our legal counsel helped with that language. Item 5 is simply adding training requirements from the 24 legislative session to incorporate the requirements from House Bill 2805. And so then I think we've got the last 2 that might take a little bit. So item 6 is the discussion about the interaction between the commission and staff. And that's one of the reasons why Ashley is here, so that she can hear from the commission and, she's going to be making these edits. So I'll open it up to the commission, unless Ashley, you have some opening comments.
No, I think it's pretty clear in points 6 and 7. Just basically, we'd like to hear, in an open discussion, any commissioners' thoughts on, codifying a kind of common practice for commissioner interactions with staff, what that should look like, who it should go through, etc.
The only question that I had, Ashley, is you guys deal with a lot of other public agencies, governmental agencies. Is there a standard best practices that SDAO suggests, or anyone else that has verbiage? Is that addressed other places?
I wouldn't say it's always addressed in a bylaw level. Sometimes it's adopted via policy, sometimes it's adopted in code. It just depends on the individual city or client, special district, county, etc. But we've definitely done it before. So, you know, if we were to help Kevin with drafting, then we definitely could provide some suggested language. I think what would be important is just clarifying, you know, who at the staff level you would want as a point of contact, whether there would be one point of contact or multiple, what that process would look like a little bit more from your perspective, and then just the very basic parameters around it.
Personally think we gotta do this one carefully with some real thought to it. We could very easily fall back into a trap that the commissioners are never allowed to talk to any staff, only through the executive director. And I believe doing that, you lose a ton of information and a sense of what's truly going on that you're responsible for as a governing board. I also totally agree that there ought to be some kind of control on it. That you can't just go take up somebody's time 100% of the time, sitting in their office, just beating on the table, asking for this and this and this. Nobody wants that. I kind of like the way what you've got it in here that basically says, you know, the way we're organized right now. When we first started, I was on the bridge, you're doing the airport. Ben is looking at lot one. We haven't figured out what Christie's doing
I don't
yet,
do
but
anything.
it's just easy. But that kind of assignments kind of requires you to interface with staff at a certain level. You never ever want to direct staff to do anything, and I don't think we have. We can suggest, we can get to Kevin and suggest, but we don't direct. So I think the way you've got it in here that you go to Christie and Kevin, and they're gonna have to basically give approval and tell the people that are on staff, hey, Steve's gonna be coming to talk to you about these kinds of things, and it's okay. I think that's fine.
What if we did that, just to build on that, and I like that idea, what if, you know, we, at the beginning of each year, we look at, you know, which commissioner is in charge of X, Y, and Z, and we kind of do that, and we're pretty good. I know where to go if I have questions on the bridge, airport, that I have, or whatever Christie's doing. I know where to go, and I would always go to, if I had a bridge question, I would always contact you, and you as a conduit first before maybe calling somebody else to work. Maybe that's how we do it and put the responsibility on ourselves. So if I, a commissioner, would like to speak with a member of staff, a member of one of your committees, a member of something under your umbrella, which you take care of, I do it through you. Get your okay and I'm off.
That makes, to me, that makes some sense too.
And I agree with you that
Same conduit.
right, the open communication that Kevin has fostered here is not something I ever want to lose or go back on.
Yeah.
But perhaps going through the lead commissioner and just getting that initial okay would be an easy way of doing it, putting it on ourselves to do that.
But the original alignment is done once a year,
Yeah,
and we all agree with it.
I think we could take that list of 25 things and really put it into a box of 5.
Mhm.
And it's because some of them, like personnel committee, well, we know who that's going to be, but that's not what we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's the real sectors of the board. I think we can put most of them in a box of 5.
And I think that, you know, after speaking with Tor and also Kat, like, you know, bylaws are an excellent framework and they should be a document that is not modified often. So they should be a little bit more generic, whereas like you saying, the bylaw says we talk about it once a year. The talk once a year is the agreement. The bylaw is the framework that just says we talk about it once a year.
Makes sense to me. Ashley, did you
What do you think?
get the gist of that? So basically, once a year, maybe during that annual business resolution,
Mhm.
we can codify those liaison relationships.
Perfect. Does that work for you?
What would you think of that?
I just one reservation. And that is that the executive director is our employee, our sole employee. So when I started on the board, I sat down with Kevin and we talked about, and I said, okay, what if I have a question and I want to really get some deep answers on, I don't know, the finance situation? And his guidance to me was, oh, you come in and talk to Debbie about it, just give me a heads up. Because there is a potential there to monopolize her time. And if she doesn't have it, or if I asked him about, hey, I want to know about this, or there's a potential that I go to the wrong person and waste their time. Whereas he could direct me better. So I still think that our executive director, I would hesitate to say, oh, if I had a question about the bridge, I would talk to Mike, and Mike would say, yeah, go talk to this one person in maintenance. If I'm just completely short circuiting Kevin, I'm a little bit concerned about that.
I agree.
And exempt him from that idea.
Yeah, because he's our employee. And that's being part of that process is really important. And he might say, if I said, hey, is it cool if I drop in and talk to so-and-so for a while? He might say, actually, no, that person's got this major thing to do right now. That's not good.
Yeah,
For right now.
that's fair.
So I don't know to what extent we codify that in the bylaws, how to make that sensible.
That's why I was saying if we do it where we say once a year we have this discussion, we can codify things as necessary, realizing that there's always gonna be exceptions to everything.
Yeah, I also agree with the sentiment that we don't want the bylaws to be so rigid and narrow that it hamstrings our effectiveness. So there's all your material to work with.
Clear as mud.
Yeah.
Very clear. I guess listening to you all, I had a couple thoughts about how we could potentially structure it. I think we could still keep the language that we are generally suggesting to have a single point of contact and then permitting exceptions on a case-by-case basis. We could basically put that general language into your bylaws, but then have a common practice that on an annual basis, you meet and grant that exception by resolution to allow certain points of contact to be individual commissioners for certain key aspects of port function, basically, right? And so you are allowed still that discretion. It's just that the base policy is communication through a point of contact, and otherwise you just have to talk about it, basically.
That's fine.
Great.
Okay.
And then the last item, unless there's others that you've thought of, is the censure process. I don't have a lot of familiarity with that process. I know Ashley probably has seen it, so that's
why it's in there.
yep, that's a question for the commission to discuss. Or if there's questions to Ashley.
I mean, I guess I would defer again to Ashley and what are best practices that other organizations are utilizing. It seems like it should be a pretty standard.
Definitely. So I think this is another of those ones, just as what we just discussed, right? You have to be careful and very forward thinking in your implementation of a censure section in your bylaws. Basically, if you're going to permit this, you need to allow commissioners due process, which means an opportunity, a notice of the fact that you are considering a censure, and then also an opportunity to appeal. And then also ideally criteria by which you would be reviewing a potential situation for censure. And then ultimately the result of a censure wouldn't be any sort of formal removal from a commissioner position. It would be more of a public admonishment, basically, of saying you didn't follow one of these bylaws, or you didn't follow another formal port policy requirement, and we found that to be true as a commission.
What do you think?
I mean, it's not fun, but it's something that's been lacking from our bylaws and probably does need to have some sort of address.
Here's the thought, and I'm really curious. I mean, maybe Ashley can add something to this. If a quorum of our body decides to censure a one of us, we've already failed as a board. So then the question is, what purpose is censure achieving? And basically, it's to have a public record slap on the wrist. So what does that achieve? Like, why have a thing unless we have a goal in having it? Why? I mean, basically, let's say I really crossed the line egregiously, and you guys are like, "Oh man, you got to be censured," and I'm like, "Okay," and you do it. Is the whole purpose then that if I chose then to run for re-election, you can say, "Hey, look at this guy. He should. You voters, you should." Is it a public service to voters? What is it? What's the purpose of it?
So, yeah, so I mean, voters can always, through their own election, choose to do a veto, choose to do any other sort of actions, right? But commissioners yourselves, you do not have very much power over the conduct of your fellow commissioners, or to express your personal or your collective displeasure with their actions. And so it is really one of the only limited ways that you can do so. So I agree, it's limited. And what is it beyond just a public slap on the wrist? I'm not sure, but it is that, right? It is a public statement regarding the conduct of another commissioner.
Yeah, so I guess in that example, it would be like if I showed up to every meeting and just yelled at everyone all the time
Or smoked.
or
Can't do that.
and it really bothered the majority of the people in the room.
Yeah.
Right now, there's really nothing that anybody can do, at least this way. I don't know.
It's weird.
It is
Like I
weird.
said, if we have to use it, there's been a failure already. But I don't think if it's a best practice, it might be good to have.
It's another of those sections that I think it's included in many of the handbooks as a recommended term in bylaws or in charters or in council rules, commission rules. It's really, I think, up to the individual commission on a case-by-case basis if it's something that you all want to implement for the same reasons that you've already identified, right? So if you think it's a valuable or potentially valuable tool for in that public context, right? Considering that there isn't anything else that the commission as a body can do in that sort of extreme, unlikely scenario, it's one option to consider, but it's by no means necessary.
You can foresee a potential situation, I don't know, in 20 years, completely different composition, some crazy problem could come up that we can't think of right now.
So let's say we censor one of us. What does that truly mean? Does that mean that that person can't participate in a vote? Does that mean?
Doesn't mean.
I think
anything.
it just means that you can publicly talk about it.
Yeah, that is the
Well,
extent
we're
of
already
it.
publicly talking about it when it's a public meeting, right? If somebody's acting out.
But I
I
would
don't know what
say,
we're really gonna get with a censor.
Yeah, I think that it was more of we're redoing the we're amending the bylaws, having new legal counsel look at it. It's a kind of a boilerplate thing in a lot of documents, and it was an opportunity to just
But if we're
button
trying
it
to,
up. We don't have to put it in.
well, I don't know what we're really gonna get for it. And if we got somebody that's bad enough that we wanna vote them off the island,
We can't.
we can't.
you can't.
So
So I would,
what are we gonna
I-
do? It's
I think I would,
classic government, we're gonna go put something in place that we're never gonna use and take up space.
Ashley?
yeah, I guess I would just add to all of that. And I appreciate that. I understand you don't want to put unnecessary provisions into your bylaws. And you know, at the end of the day, it's your choice if you want to include this or not. I think there are many situations where, like you correctly said, if you get to this point, you may have unfortunately failed one another, and that might be how you personally feel about it. But regardless, you are not encouraged to discuss those personal feelings in the public meetings, regardless of how interactions are proceeding potentially behind the scenes, or how those interactions are affecting one another, affecting staff, affecting outside parties, affecting anybody, right? And so being unable to talk about those in a public setting, again, this would give you that ability. An admonishment, a public admonishment would say, these are actions that are occurring, they're in violation of their bylaws, and we do not agree with them as a commission. You, the voters, have the ability to elect this individual onto the board and keep them there. But this is what we are observing in our capacity as the commission. To your point, that doesn't mean you can do anything truly, right? Legally, you can't, restrict their access to any other functions. You can't remove them from the board, but it's a public statement.
So if we're gonna do that, then I think either in this or someplace else, we have to describe the process.
Correct.
And I would expect
Definitely.
that somebody would nominate or send a motion and we vote on it. And
That's what,
appeal and all the rest of it.
yeah, I think that's just adding it into the bylaws, and then we have to determine what is going. I think the bylaws.
Here's a crazy idea. Here's a crazy idea. We don't add the censure process right now. And if at some point down the line, the board feels that it would be necessary to create a censure, all you need is a quorum to add the bylaws, right?
Sure.
Well, not exactly.
Not exactly.
Because it's a 2-month process.
To change the bylaws.
Right.
So in the end,
And I'll also add
I hope
that
it's never needed. I mean, I hope every commission in the future works together the way that we have, the way commissions before us have. But what's the harm in putting it in there? If it allows a discussion, perhaps if it's ever needed, there's no harm in putting it
Yeah,
there.
I agree.
And hopefully it's forgotten about and never needed. I'm just right on the line about it
I know.
in terms of like, so yeah.
I'm okay putting it.
Yeah.
I am too.
Okay, so I move that we include a censure process in our bylaws. Do we need a motion?
I'm just taking this as consensus. We'll work on it.
Do it.
Yeah, consensus to do it. So,
It's icky, we don't wanna talk about it.
thank you, Ashley. Appreciate that. Is there anything else? If not, that's all I have on that staff memo. Thank you.
Okay, and now you're not off the hook, because now we're at the executive director report, you're back on.
That's right. The only thing I have.
You wanted to add?
Only thing is just that the Senate passed you probably saw it, the recreational immunity legislation, which is a great policy change from the legislature to make it a little bit easier for public and private property owners that let people recreate on the lands. And so it does need to go to the House, but it looks like there's enough, it was unanimous out of the Senate. So that's the only thing I have in addition to what was in the printed report.
Okay,
You got one comment on your report on page 190. You mentioned that David Windsor, Cardinal Glass, is doing another star status celebration.
Yes,
For folks that don't understand what that truly is, that's a big deal in industry. Star status on safety is, it takes a lot of work to achieve that. It really shows their organization is really embedded in the safety culture. What I would suggest, Kevin, should consider you and Ryan attending that. And maybe you guys consider, this is a small operation, but you can still go after it, a star status for the port.
very good. Yeah, absolutely.
And he can certainly help you think through that process. And your safety management plan that you put out is a very good start. But it's down here. Star status is way up here. So something to think about.
Let me know if anybody wants to go with me on that. Were you interested in?
April 9th, I have to check
Yeah,
my schedule.
but I'll be going for sure. So if anybody wants to join me, just let me know.
great. Any commissioner or committee reports?
Comment.
Commissioners need to get their SEI reports filed in the next couple of weeks. I think everybody's done that before. It's required of us if you haven't.
All right, I'll go over it with you.
Mine's done today.
Nice. Boy, Patty, you got them trained pretty good.
We don't want to make Patty mad. And then,
I got one quick thing. I just want to clarify a confusion. We had a constituent, Kiera Brierton, write a letter to the court, very upset about the discussion of jet fuel services at the airfield. And I think unfortunately that Mr. Brierton is just misinformed. That's not something that's under discussion or has even really been talked about in quite a long time, if I'm right. I mean,
100% agree.
so I think
No discussion.
I think somebody just heard something and was like, "Oh no, we're going to be flooded with jets," and it's just, no,
7:47.
that's not under not under discussion. And
sounds like your American Airlines flight. yeah.
no, it's not just that. It's a small jets. Our runway just really isn't long enough. So that's just want to clear that up so there's no confusion about it.
So you do bring up a good point. I mean, you did have another bullet in here about this meeting and maybe doing some videos or something to get the words out.
Yes.
This may be a great one right there that, hey, we're hearing there's a rumor out there that we're gonna allow 737s to land and American Airlines is setting up. No, it's not. We have no plans for Jet A. That could be.
Those are
Your
good
first
little
one.
topics.
Yeah, so the ninth bullet on page 190
Mhm.
is that summary. So that was something, I know that Commissioner, do want to give a shout out. Commissioner Chapman and Shepherd did go on KIHR on Monday and represented Ford.
It was really Commissioner Shepherd.
Just saying, I didn't want to talk.
He's like, go first, and then the whole.
I haven't heard it yet, but it sounds like it went well. But I think just to pivot from what Commissioner Fox is saying, whether the board would like to start doing 2-minute little vignette videos that can be posted on social media. It's just, you never know how the public's going to react to that stuff. It can be from a very good origin, but there's
I
always
like it. I think it's an opportunity for engagement.
Yeah, so we'll coordinate.
Well, I mean, a really good case in point, we were on the news and even, as much as we talk about stuff, it is still what we think is very common knowledge is still news to the public. And so, we talked about the foundation and
Yes.
and that was, they were unaware of that. So I do think that those little 2-minute things could be beneficial for the community.
Well, I think it's Inform Gorge or Inform Hood River or
Mhm.
something, that they take snippets out of this thing. And a couple of days from now, they'll issue it out on Facebook. Maybe there's a way that if you could do it quick enough, you could get that into that.
And then they keep it promote that.
So that's great. So that's very helpful. So I'll work with Commissioner Chapman and lay out
I do stuff.
kind of a game plan. And I think she wanted to rotate it so all the commissioners
Yes,
got a chance.
I don't want to do it.
Might have to start with Commissioner Fox first.
No. I'm shy.
Okay, all right, any other question calls? And if not, we've got spring planning coming up and, election filing deadline is Thursday, if anyone else wants to run, and, any commissioners have anything they want to add? Barring none, I will adjourn. We do not have an executive session, do we?
No executive session.
Thank you everyone for coming. Sorry.